I'm Nina Carter. I am a board member on the Olympia World Affairs Council, and I welcome all of you to our first presentation for this coming year. You may know that every third Thursday of the month, we meet here and we have speakers about global and international issues. That is the mission of the Olympia World Affairs Council, is to have civic engagement and talk about international issues that are affecting our lives right now. And that's one of the reasons we wanted Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck here tonight to give us an insight into that. But a couple of housekeeping things. You'll see on your table, table tents, there's a fundraising QR code, which is always important for us. And if you turn it around, you'll see two special events that we would like you to know about. This is not our speaker series, but it is something we're doing in conjunction with the Evergreen State College. It's the first one is September 26th. What is truth? Journalism, podcasting, and nuanced storytelling in the Northwest by two women, Sarah and Malia. So that's at Evergreen State College, Friday, September 26th from 6 to 7 p.m. The second one is Global Responsibilities of Higher Education in Uncertain Times, October 6th, Monday, 6 to 8. So check out the flyers for two more events that will be co-sponsored with World Affairs Council. And for our speakers that are coming, I'm just going to give you a little highlight on these. Of course, Denny Heck is right here. And then for our next presentation here, October 16th, will be the World Refugee Crisis and work with World Refugee Council. We'll have a speaker who's the executive director for World Relief for Western Washington. In November, we'll have a speaker about nuclear non-proliferation. So that's something that maybe is not the forefront on your mind right now, but nuclear non-proliferation is a concern for us because the SALT treaties, from what I understand, are maybe not going to be renewed. So we'd like to know more about that. So just a couple of ideas of what's coming up in this coming year. And before getting started next, I'd like our board members for the World Affairs Council to stand up where you are, because these are the people that bring all of this together. And I'd like you to give them a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. And we have to say that we're so glad we have younger generation on our board now because they took care of all the Zoom. So thank you guys. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And for those of you on Zoom, we hope you can hear us. We hope you can see us sort of. And this is being recorded. Camera, I think, is up there, or it could be up there, or it could be over there. I don't, there. Okay, good. So, all right, now I get to read off something that I really, I'm going to read the whole thing word for word. But do they know that there's this amazing picture of you and Paula on your Facebook page with all your grandkids? It's a great picture. Oh, wait a minute. I'm being told by my program chair something. Hold on. Do you mind if I interrupt? We won't have to spend. I am. I'm interrupting myself. Gary Walker is our program chair. He's the one that finds all these speakers and connects with them. He also is part of something called, well, I'll let you.
So what I want to talk about real quick, there is a study group that we have here. It's called the Great Decisions. It's organized and created by the Foreign Policy Association. And we meet by Zoom. We're going to start up in mid-January, and we meet twice a month. And this is a discussion group that we have where everybody gets together. There's a topic that's being presented at each session. Somebody leads that. There's a video about that session, and then somebody leads the discussion on it. And so, for the coming year, let me give you the topics. And if you're interested, we are in the process of recruiting about 10 to 12 new members. There's no cost. The only cost is the purchase of the briefing book that has all the writings in it. And the folks who write it are subject matter experts. So some of these are very timely. America and the World, Trump 2.0 Foreign Policy by John Eikenberry, Trump Tariffs and the Future of the World Economy, U.S. U.S.-China Relations, Ruptured Alliances and the Risks of Nuclear Nonproliferation, Ukraine and the Future of European Security, Multilateral Institutions in a Changing World Order, U.S. Engagement in Africa, and the Future of Human Rights and International Law. So if you're interested and would like to participate, please grab me before we leave tonight. If not, my contact information is here on those printouts, on those forms. So please see me. And we're looking to recruit about 10 to 12 new folks that would join us who are interested in that stuff. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Well, I just wanted to say that Pete Fox is right here. Raise your hand, Pete. Pete is our new president, and he and Gary are the ones that are doing the great decisions on Zoom starting in January. Correct. And so it's a really interesting, in-depth discussion about several topics that come in the book. So thank you, Gary, and thank you, Pete. Back to Denny.
Thank you, Nina. Appreciate being back. I enjoyed myself last time so very much, and I'm honored to be here. Although, as I like to say, I'm Lieutenant Governor. I'm honored to be invited anywhere. I fear that my mission here tonight will be fairly mundane or pedestrian compared to some of the more global issues that you're talking about. But as I understand it, my charge is to discuss trade and tariffs and international relations in Washington, especially as it relates to the office of Lieutenant Governor. I frankly can't do that without just taking a step back, as I often find myself doing, and talking about what the office of Lieutenant Governor is, because in my now 52 years of intermittent state service, there's never been a role about which there are more misunderstandings and myths than that of Lieutenant Governor. I find that most people think that the Lieutenant Governor is one of two things it's not: Deputy Governor. Not true. Don't run on the same ticket, don't have to be a member of the same political party, and the Lieutenant Governor has really no ongoing executive branch responsibility. Or they think the Lieutenant Governor is the 50th state senator. And I know they think this because people ask me all the time to vote for or against bills or to introduce bills. I don't have the authority to do either, except in the rare instance, of course, of a tie. And that happens all the time. This is my 5th year. One time. So it begs the question, though, of what this job really is. And I want to describe that a little bit so we can put it in context for tonight's subject. Number one, the Lieutenant Governor isn't this a really cool podium I've created here? Is a really cheap insurance policy in case the governor gets hit by a bus? Because according to our Constitution, the Lieutenant Governor would become governor. In fact, anytime the governor leaves Washington State airspace, the Lieutenant Governor is the acting governor. And I want to be the first person to tell you that that sounds a lot more impressive than it really actually is. That provision of our Constitution having been written before there were phones or barely telegraphs. So the necessity to do that is just not what it was when they wrote that language. I think the most important role of the Lieutenant Governor is to be the President of the Senate, the presiding officer. I think it's important because it's an incredible opportunity, not just to decide who speaks, not just to enforce the rules, but to set the tone for civil discourse on the floor. And nobody asked me about this tonight because I will go down that path for the rest of the evening in my passion that we need so very much in this country to improve civil discourse, because we seem to have forgotten that we don't have to hate each other just because we disagree, that we're not going to go down there. And then thirdly, other duties as assigned. You all know that phrase. And that's frankly where the role of lieutenant governor comes in as it relates to international relations and trade, included in the other duties as assigned is a role called Chair of the Legislative Committee on Economic Development and International Relations. Say that 5 times very fast. We call it LCETR to save breath. And that's a strictly bipartisan, bicameral entity whose job is eponymous with its title, and requires, obligates, allows us to be involved in this. It, for example, is the reason why I will lead trade missions. We didn't do any trade missions when I first got to office because of COVID. And we had to wait a while before that made sense. But since then, we've been to Canada twice, we've been to Mexico, we've been to Taiwan, and the lieutenant governor has played, I have played the role of kind of titular lead of it. We've come upon a formula that is very effective. And this is kind of commonsensical when you think about it. We joint venture with the executive branch, the State Department of Commerce and the State Department of Agriculture, which are two most concerned trading entities, and the Association of Washington Business, which brings businesses who engage in trade. A lot of that role is for me to play eye candy. I think I'm miscast in that regard. But it's an opportunity to put forth in sometimes ceremonial fashion a supposed high-ranking elected official from the state, and that's a good foot to put forward when you're dealing with other countries and you're trying to develop relations, and it's been very effective. Just this week, I was over at the Association of Washington Businesses annual policy summit, and the executive branch agencies and I and AWE sat down to talk about the next one. I think the next one's going to be in Asia, not yet formally decided, but we try to do these things strategically. We try and do them as a coalition for strength. We try and do them strategically where we think we can make progress on behalf of our trading relationship. They do bear success. I mean, this is not just about taking a junket. I was a million miler after 6 or 7 years serving in Congress. If I never got on another airplane as long as I lived, I'd be okay with that. There isn't another country in the world that A, I wouldn't enjoy going to visit, but B, I can live just fine if I never get there, because I've spent more than enough of my life on an airplane. We do these things because they can matter. Last year, for example, we went to Canada as this large group. And here was a situation then. This is why I think my presentation is a little more pedestrian than kind of international things that you usually are used to discussing. But it turned out that British Columbia vintners had their grape crop wiped out. So they had no grapes. Turned out last year, grape growers in Washington State grew a surplus. But Canada had some barriers that did not enable them to bring grapes into British Columbia from Washington State. And so we worked that baby hard. We worked it in Vancouver, we worked it in Victoria, and we flew to Ottawa. And it was a way to solve a problem both for winemakers in British Columbia and grape growers in Washington State. And we succeeded. It was a good thing. It was a very good thing. We also, the IR and LCETR, International Relations, because of a personal commitment of mine, we worked very hard at deepening our relations with the legislature in British Columbia. And I've been at this since I got elected. Now, way before what came to pass later. And the reason I was so motivated to allocate so much time to this was that I frankly, I hope I don't offend anybody here, but I frankly think we've taken our relationship with China for granted for a long time. That 5,250 mile international border between our two nations is the largest international border on the face of the planet. that's enjoyed more than 150 years of peace. And from a broad philosophical point of view, I will tell you this. If you think about the development of America as a great economic power, it was made possible by a lot of things. But one of the most important things it was made possible by is that we were isolated in large part for most of that time from the kind of conflict that had raged forever, since time immemorial, in Europe. And we were isolated because we had those wonderful moats on the East Coast and the West Coast. We know them as the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. And we had relatively good relations with Mexico, kind of up and down over a long period of time, but outstanding relations with Canada. They are, depending on the quarter, our largest trading partner, our longest standing ally. We have not fought a war in the last 100+ years that the sons and daughters of Canadians weren't in the trenches with American service members. And most importantly, shared values. Now, when you fast forward all of that's why I was so motivated. But when you fast forward it more contemporaneously, Greater Vancouver, the other one, I don't know you and I don't like you. May I ask your name? I can find you, Kim. Kim, Vancouver, Canada took its name 61 years after the establishment of Vancouver, Washington, the oldest continuously inhabited non-Indian settlement in the entire Pacific Northwest. My place of birth, my hometown, Granville was your name. It was perfectly serviceable. The pretenders to the north, that economy has exploded. And it has become increasingly intertwined with our economy. Those are not our cousins up there. They're our brothers and our sisters. And we have ignored them. So I thought, we got to do better by this. We got to do better because of all of this. We got to do better because we do have occasional friction at the border. We have issues that we should be jointly dealing with. You know, up until not too long ago, if Mount Baker blew, which is an active volcano, there was no joint response. And let me tell you, as somebody who was in the state legislature when St. Helens blew and it was in my legislative district, that mountain, that ash, it didn't give a damn where that international border is. It doesn't know that border. Fish don't know where that border is. The rivers that flood and cause damage on both sides don't know where that border is. So we need to be talking. We need to be working with one another. And so we proposed this parliamentary exchange. And we proposed it to the legislature. They passed it. We've been up to Canada and back and any number of times to memorialize a charter to set this up. And I think it's going to happen in the next 6 weeks. And I'm proud of it, and I'm looking forward. As I like to say, we actually have a lot to learn from them. And they would say they have a lot to learn from us. So that's where the IR comes in. Secondly, the Lieutenant Governor is also the official liaison to the Consular Corps. Now, for those of you who don't know, many nations have a consul general. Oftentimes they're in San Francisco, but many of them are in Seattle. If they don't have one, they often have an honorary consul general. This is the liaison to people from that country to work with. And it's the role of the Lieutenant Governor to meet with them. I have had more than 70 one-on-one meetings with either consul generals or with ambassadors to the United States who are doing a swing out here. Last week, the consul general from Portugal was up from San Francisco, and we had an occasion to meet. We sponsor the annual Consular Corps reception, which is held at the same time as the governor's annual State of the State. And it's frankly one of the most fun parts of my job. And you're going to, when I get done telling you this, you're going to say, you shouldn't get a paycheck. You should pay the state for this privilege. And I probably should. But I use it as a shameless opportunity to just ask them questions and learn more about their country than I would ever have an opportunity to do reading Wikipedia or who knows what else. The truth of the matter is that the people that other countries send in foreign service or diplomatic roles to America tend to be the best of the best. And they have been almost uniformly incredibly smart, incredibly insightful, incredibly wise as it comes to geopolitics because it is their world. I want to mention that there's a new consul general in town, and you all should keep an eye on this. Although he's now just a year away from leaving, he's been here not quite 2 years. Prashka Gupta from India. They've never had one, and they put one in Seattle last year, and this guy's unbelievable. There's no grass grows under his feet. He is an amazing representative of the nation of India. Sometimes these conversations aren't all that comfortable. I want to make sure I'm saying this in the right spot. No, I'm going to say it later. So finally, on the subject of tariffs and their impact on our state, I was in Spokane for the Association of Washington Business Conference because I moderated a discussion between former Trump Chief of Staff, Director of Office of Management Budget, Special Envoy to Northern Ireland, and Member of Congress, Mick Mulvaney from South Carolina, with whom I not just served, I served on committee with him, which is your most important reference point when you're in Congress because all the work's done in committee, and former U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Ron Kirk in the Obama administration. And I told them that when I contemplated this conversation, I found it terrifying. They laughed a lot harder than you did. So when it comes to the impact on trade, keep some things in mind. Number one, depending on the quarter or the year, Washington State's the most trade-driven state economy in the United States of America. We sell a lot of stuff throughout the world. We sell an incredible amount of stuff throughout the world. We sell planes, which are pretty expensive per unit, and agricultural crops throughout the world, and all sorts of other things. Frankly, here in Western Washington, I think it's kind of easy to forget how important agriculture and farming is to our state's overall economy because most of it's on the west side, or the east side, rather. But we as a nation, I love reminding people this, you probably all know this, we're the nation's #1 producer of apples, 65% of the nation's apple crop. We're the #1 producer of sweet cherries, pears, mints, hops, 70% of the nation's hop supply. Raspberries, 90% of the nation's raspberries. We're #2 in grapes and potatoes, and we're consistently in the top 5 to 10 of all manner of other crops, most notably including wheat. So when tariffs go up, we're going to get hurt. At this conference that I was at, there was a gentleman from the original Vancouver, Kim, has a small manufacturing plant, who stood up and gave chapter and verse about how his business is not going to survive this. And then others would talk about it as well. Now, the truth is that there were I won't say a majority, I have no idea. There were quite a few Trump sympathy people there, so it was kind of muted. But one at a time, people would come up and say, this is how I'm being affected, and it's pretty ugly. And some of you probably saw the study that the Office of Financial Management finished last week that estimated that the impact to our state's budget as a consequence of the damage to the economy by tariffs over the next 4 years is $2.2 billion. That's real money, and that job losses could total 30,000. And those are real lives and real impacts. The truth of the matter is, more generally, as it relates to tariffs, there isn't a reputable economist on record anywhere of believing that material increases in tariffs will have a net positive effect on the economy. Instead, the opposite. Nowhere. So it is going to hurt. So what about the longer term outlook? Because this too shall pass. I want to make 2 points. The first of which is the most discouraging, which is we've done long-term damage to our relations with the rest of the world. We just have. And that's going to take a while to fix. I want you to know back, Kim, and I don't know if you're feeling that you maintain dual citizenship. Yeah, bless you. Kim could probably tell you better, but I will tell you, and I have a lot of friends up there involved in the BC Parliament and around it. The 51st state business, it did not go over well. They are, and to my way of thinking, understandably, deeply, deeply offended. They are offended to their core. And they are angry and they are hurt. And they're not going to forget it in the short term, for sure. Tell you another story, and I don't mean to be too political here, but I had an ambassador to the United States from a northern European nation who shall go unnamed for obvious reasons in my office early in the 24 presidential election cycle. And I was pretty stunned because as smart as these folks are, as willing as they are to kind of share and open up, they're always diplomatic. And at one point, he was asking me about political context and my forecast, and I shared with him. And he said, I'll never forget this. No one before or since has said anything quite like this, but it was a major Northern European country. He said, I'll tell you this, if Donald Trump is elected again, we're done with you. Now, that wasn't about tariffs. That was about respect. That was about whether or not we're going to subscribe to the ancient wisdom. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That was about being from a region of the world that is a consequence of the most devastating conflict in our world's history. We stood up a world order that provided for growing and expanding prosperity and peace for the first time, literally, in 1,000 years in Europe, that was of an enduring nature. And it's easy to fall into a hole. It's pretty hard to crawl out of it. And that's frankly where we're at. That said, all that said, I want to finish with this. Our group, to try to stand up this parliamentary exchange, went up to Victoria in May, not the first time. And I frankly didn't know what to expect. I knew that there were people up there very angry with us. I'd been to another conference later where the U.S. ambassador to Canada tried to make light of the 51st state thing in front of a half Canadian, half American Pacific Northwest audience. It didn't go over well then either. But I was worried. And I was worried, frankly, because I see it largely the way they do. This is no way to treat friends or allies or trading partners. And it was really apprehensive. Here's the deal. I came to them, I brought a legislative delegation to them, and there's a member there Rick Glumac. They call them MLAs, member of the Legislative Assembly. And Rick could be British. I'm a hugger. He's uncomfortable shaking hands. And so we walked into the conference room when we first got there to meet, and he threw his arms around me. He said, as did others, "We understand this is not you." And I tell you that story because there's hope in that story. Again, our relationship with Kim's family is deeper than what's going on in the headlines and longer lasting. It won't be easy, but it is. So I find hope in that. And I frankly find hope in so many of the people that I know, including those of you in this room, the Olympia World Affairs Council, who lift up these issues and give them consideration and give them thought and thoughtfulness. And I think that's a positive path forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any. Are you Kim's husband? Are you born here? In Washington State? Close to Vancouver, Washington. I like you. Yes, sir. But anyway, curiosity, I am really intrigued. I just kind of revisited a book that I read when I was in college, probably, called Ecotopia. And I think it's in I'm going to say it's a 50-year anniversary for it or something like that. And the concept of the book, are you familiar with it? I went to Evergreen, of course. United States, I mean, it's the West Coast and British Columbia. Right. And given what you are working on, I'm curious to know whether there's any thoughts or discussion at all about. What's your first name? Columbia. What's your first name? Steve read a book 50 years ago in which it posited that the West Coast and BC would secede into their own nation with kind of a green orientation on the world. I don't think that's going to happen. But you're beginning to see, for example, Washington, Oregon, and California getting together on vaccines.
Yeah.
And yes, thank you. And it won't surprise me if we see more and more of those things over the next 3 years, 3 months, and 4 days. 4 months and 4 days. Having said, I don't think that's going to happen. I also don't think he's going to run again. He's trolling us. Don't take the bait. But I will tell you that I think our nation is being tested beyond what it has in a very long period of time. Yes.
Does the current tariff situation impact financing for purchasers of Boeing airplanes? Does the fates of that large employer for our state swing in the wind at all due to the current situation?
Good question. It looks to me, without a lot of inside information, that the Boeing company and the president have a pretty good relation because they're announcing deals when he's doing these one-offs. By the way, on the tariff thing, I'll give you something else to be optimistic about. At this conference that I was at where I moderated the conversation between Ambassador Kirk and Mick Mulvaney, they're both lawyers. And I asked Mick in particular, what's going to happen in the Supreme Court, because they just accepted the appeal on his authority to actually do these things. And Mick, remember, he was his chief of staff in the first term. Not a lot of love lost there, however, between Mick and some of the others. He kind of made news during this conversation. He knew the press was in the room. He knew it. And he said about Trump's economic advisor, if Peter Navarro were in this room, I'd punch him in the nose. Mick predicted that the Supreme Court will strike down the tariffs. We'll find out soon.
Good evening, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you for all of your info this evening. My name's Nicole Poole. I am a hotel sales manager from the better Vancouver down below. So I drove up today for your meeting, and I met this afternoon with the Society of Government Meeting Professionals, and we met at the Washington Association for School Principals. And part of my job is to bring government groups into the state to meet and work with federal and state level government agencies. A lot of those agencies are on a huge travel kind of freeze or ban right now where they're not being allowed to have conferences. Some of them are having to pay large cancellation fees to just not have their folks travel. Is that something that you're seeing with kind of budgets for the state and in different
Okay.
agencies?
It's Nicole. Yeah, Nicole. First, foremost, up front, don't slay the messenger. The budget difficulty that you observed the state having in this most recently concluded legislative session ain't over. And I would characterize the budget as in a pretty precarious situation. The legislature left town in late April. Between the March economic revenue forecast update and the June update, they took $750 million off the projected revenues. They took the ending fund balance for the biennium we are now in down from 250 million, which is not that big in a $78 billion budget, to $2 million. That's not even vaporware. So the state's in a pretty precarious situation. Pay attention next Tuesday, September 23rd. The revenue forecast council will make another projection. They have one more to go before the governor makes his budget submission to the January session. But I think there's going to be a lot of belt tightening, and I think travel is definitely something that will be on their menu of options. Sorry, don't
Yeah,
slay
no,
the messenger.
that's what they were saying today, that they're like, okay, tighten up your belts the next 2 to 4 years. We were hoping it get better this next year, but it's seeming that it's gonna kind of continue.
I don't see that. I don't see it getting better, Nicole. I'm sorry. And it's interesting. The strikingly attractive woman with the brilliant silver hair in the back in pink, Washington State's second lady, Paula Frucy Heck. Come on, it's an applause line. You should get together with her and talk hotels. She knows hotels. Yes. Hi, Pete.
As LIDAR, Republicans in the Senate and the House to be so servile to our president? I'm asking a too sensitive question.
What's the question?
What has led our Republicans in the House and the Senate to be so servile, in my mind, to our president? I've never seen them give away authority like this group.
Yeah. Well, it's a mix of things, like most things in life. One of them is there's an increasing number there who just agree with him. There's an increasing number who agree with the style. By style, I mean he was really, for a lot of reasons, elected, and he was elected. But one of the main ones was he promised to be a disruptor. Well, he is. And there are a lot of people who thought the federal government needed disruption. A lot of members of Congress think that. And then there's an element, frankly, of people who are just flat afraid of him because he threatens to primary them, to destroy them, and the like. There's not a lot of constitutional checks and balances going on right now. And you all will have an opportunity. I'm here in my official capacity. This can't be about campaigns per se, but you all have an opportunity to weigh in on that next year and then 2 years after that. Yes, sir.
Who, me?
You have the mic.
Barry Seal. We know each other for when I worked in OFM, and the revenue estimates were rising at that point. But my question is about international relations or relationships generally. You're talking about it at the kind of political governmental level, but I was interested to hear just a few weeks ago a report on either one of the local public radio stations or NPR about how Palouse wheat farmers were bringing over some of their important customers from Asia, from China, Japan, or whatever, and taking them onto their farms, and they had built relationships over several years that was helping to make sure that they could continue to move their crops into those customers' hands. I don't know if that's enough to overcome the kind of tariff barriers and problems that we're going to have. And I just would like your comments about that.
Thank you, Larry. Well, no, it's not enough in and of itself, but it actually is the start of it all. And if point two, if you remember nothing of what I say, good foreign relations are based on relationships. It's why student exchanges. It's why having students come here to go to school. It's why going there on trade missions and coming home are so important. Even if the surface of it is largely ceremonial, it's still a predicate. And as an example, this Sunday morning, the governor is not available. I will be greeting the president of Vietnam on the tarmac up in King County, who's actually on his way to the United Nations, but Vietnam is becoming an increasingly important trading partner of ours. Those things are important to do. These relationships matter.
I have the microphone. Hi, Denny, again. Could you speak a little bit more about your comment about China? You mentioned it briefly. Okay.
You meant Canada. Canada.
You meant Canada.
China.
Oh, I thought you said, okay. I thought,
Bothered to correct me at the time.
no.
Sorry, I didn't mean to say.
That's, well, so here's my question. What about China? And I have a second question.
What about China? Years ago, I heard what do you call it? Portmanteau? Van Wagenen, you're the smartest guy in the room. When you mash two words together?
Portmanteau.
Yeah. Portmanteau. The Canadian knew. The word was frenemy. Mashing together friend and enemy. Look, the relationship that we need to have with China is where our hand is on their shoulder and our elbow is locked. They are inevitably going to become an even more important economic presence in the world. And they mean, in some cases, to do it at our expense. And under Xi, they are increasingly aggressive. They're aggressive by putting a military installation in Djibouti, by building the islands in the South China Sea for military purposes, by constantly threatening Taiwan and the like. I tend to think that we exaggerate threats often, and in their case, there are times when we have. Like us, frankly, they can become the victims of their own bad judgment. One of the stories that Ambassador Kirk told yesterday was how they were having our lunch in these couple of countries in Africa where he kept visiting. And he said he went there the first year and he was told, we have a corrupt system. Where is it? And Ambassador Kirk said, we don't function that way. And they said, China does. And he said, the third year he went, they said, how do we get out of this? They built this stadium. They don't let us use it. They imported their laborers, many of whom they released from prison to help build it. They demand too much of us. And, you can read and hear that in a lot of places where they've overplayed their hand, especially in Africa where they were especially aggressive, but other places as well. But, this is hand on shoulder, elbow locked. We need to be very wary of them. We need to do our best to succeed in a world where they're increasingly influential, and that includes at times even doing business with them. But I don't want to be a China basher, and I'm not. But I had a friend tell me this morning at breakfast in Spokane that he was headed to China, and I said, well, have you been? He said, no. And I said, well, I want to offer some advice. Take it for what it's worth. Understand that you will be surveilled every minute. You will be surveilled in your room. You will be surveilled in your conversations, and they will tap your phones. That's the reality. That's who we're dealing with.
And my other question, closer to home, I think your office is focusing also on civic engagement and civics generally in our state and how important it is now. Can you explain a little bit more about what your office is doing that, maybe with schools or community groups?
So, Nina, my feelings are really hurt that you weren't listening at the beginning when I said nobody asked me about this, because I will go down that road for the rest of the evening. I was very clear. Can my friend Sharon Foster ask her question first?
Is Trump's immigration policy hurt our agriculture community?
Duh,
Tell me, could you talk about that?
they can't find labor.
So what's that doing to their income?
You mean the income of the laborers? Oh, to the farmers? They're being hurt. They're being hurt by tariffs. They're being hurt by labor. You don't have a lot of immigrant labor to harvest wheat, but you got it for all the fruit products, right? And they're being hurt. Look, paint me squarely, and I don't want to get too much in the national stuff. I don't have any jurisdictional authority. I'm doing my best to forget about that part of my past, painful as it was on occasion. We need a new comprehensive immigration bill. We need not to pretend like we're going to have open borders. We need not to pretend like it's okay that there are people here that are criminals from other countries who are here being here. But we also need to recognize that every single person in this room, unless there's a Native American, is an immigrant to this country. And it has made our country stronger and better. Sorry, Paula. I always use Paula's family. Paula's mom came here from what we call the old country. The old country in this case was Italy. She was half grown with her sister. And then when they got here, they had a baby brother born. When mom got here, she spoke no English. None. In fact, she was separated in Boston, not Ellis Island. She was separated because they were worried about whooping cough. And mom and her sister, Aunt Laura, had no idea what was going on. These little kids, right? What's going on? Mom, her sister, and eventually the baby brother grew up, got married, raised 9 children. Here are those 9 children. The Jesuit priest, a wealth manager, a national nonprofit executive, a CPA, the best school, middle school principal in the history of the world, another CPA and developer, and a businessman, a landscape architect, and a homemaker. Those people made America better. That is the story of America. That is the story of immigration. And we cut it off at our own peril. This business about basically scaring all the foreign students away is unbelievably counterproductive. Unbelievably counterproductive. So when, what's his face at Facebook? What's his face? Yeah, that guy. When he was getting into AI, this is another Ambassador Kirk story. I'm so glad I went to Spokane. He said when he was getting into um, AI, for the initial team, he recruited 11 people, the best of the best, the smartest of the smartest. And Ambassador Kirk saw this list and he went, some interesting names there. And he dug down deeper. Every single one of them was foreign born. Every single one. Where do you think we're going to be if we decide that those people are not welcome here? We're going to be worse off is where we're going to be. Kim?
Since Washington is so dependent on trade,
Driven.
driven on trade and the renegotiation of Kuzma, that's what we call it Canada, I don't, you reverse the thing there. Well, is there a role for Washington in reshaping that negotiation and?
Yeah, did you all hear that? USMC. USMC. I just find it greatly ironic that in 45, President Trump successfully executed USMC, and at the time declared it to be the greatest trade agreement in the history of the world. Term 2, he kicked it to the curb for no apparent reason. In fact, at one point, he even blamed Biden for it, and it was done in his term. Kim, the direct answer to your question is that there was a provision of that provides for a review at year 5 or whatever it is. And I think it was the USTR just this week opened up public comment for input as a predicate to them seeing if they need to make adjustments. Our role is best to give our input about where we think it could work even better. And it did work pretty well for a while.
Hi, I'm Nigel. I work with a nonprofit here in Olympia that works with Washington State Department of Commerce to develop industrial districts. So what we've been seeing is a lot of Canadian business, a lot of foreign business wants to site select and choose Washington State, but because of federal everything that's going on, that business risk is too high. So have you seen any strategies, or are you getting feedback from like Choose Washington about any solutions?
Thank you for the question, Nigel. Not really is the answer. Of course, in fairness to President Trump, on the one hand, he's had a whole bunch of different rationales for tariffs. Fentanyl, control the border. But the one they often come back to is to encourage a revitalization of manufacturing in America. A lot of discussion about that this week. The reality is that his governance style, which is as a disruptor, which a lot of people want, is basically chaos. He controls the narrative when it's in chaos. That's generally speaking not very conducive to business investment, because what business says all the time, and to some degree it's true, what they yearn for is as much certainty as possible. And we're just not in a time where we can have that much certainty. So we will see. I think you didn't ask, Nigel, but it's also fair to contemplate what is it that our state is doing with its policies that encourage, facilitate, or discourage. So how long were we supposed to go?
3 more minutes. And you haven't talked about civics yet. And you haven't talked about civics.
Well, don't be mean.
Till 8.
Okay, I do want to leave time for that.
Okay, Anthony Hempstead, in my day job, I'm quite involved in international trade. I'm also a candidate for Port of Olympia Commissioner. But with tariffs, I agree that they will very likely be struck down. But in the meantime, they have done just incredible damage. And a lot of that damage is going to be very, very hard to come back from. And that many of our partners internationally have already found different trading partners. What do you think that we can do as Washington State to try to rebuild those connections? Because of course, Port of Seattle, Port of Tacoma, Port of Olympia, all of those have been devastated by these changes. So would appreciate your observations.
Show up. The most important lesson of all of politics. Show up. I'm getting ready to teach a college course here, and a guest lecture. It's not a course, next month. And I was thinking about this issue of what are the keys to someone being an effective legislator? And it relates to your question, Ann. Outwork the other people. Show up. And as it relates to trade, get on the plane. There was a lot of discussion by both Ambassador Kirk and Mick Mulvaney about the importance of people whose lives are being affected by the tariffs to communicate that to policymakers in specific terms. There was a gentleman, again, I think I mentioned this earlier, from Vancouver, who laid it out. And it was very effective because he was detailed and specific. Here's what's happened to my cost of X. Here's what's happened to my cost of Y. Here's what's happened to my cost of Z. And here's what I had to pay in import tariffs that consume like 95% of his gross margin. I mean, show up, communicate, and do the hard work, even if it's what my dad used to call sawing wood. Stay at it, you know. 1 or 2 or 3 strokes of that saw doesn't break it off. Keep sawing. Civility. With the exception of Kim, you've all been very civil tonight. Yes, you were very polite. So we have the enemy is my friend. Well done. We took a poll a couple of years ago in our state. 89% of the respondents were somewhat or very concerned about the future of democracy. More disturbingly, 1 in 4 said that they had stopped speaking altogether to a member of their family or a friend, quote, because of politics. There was a tragedy last week with the murder. Regardless of your point of view about his points of view, which I don't share at all, it was a tragedy. And sad. I also found what happened in the United States House of Representatives that afternoon to be very sad. If you, looks like most of you are nodding, you saw that. Speaker Johnson asked everybody to rise for a moment of silence. I think it was our old friend Marjorie Taylor Greene started shouting in anger, should be a spoken prayer, which caused Democrats to start screaming at her, which caused Republicans to start screaming at them, and it got out of control. My God, have we come to that? I want to share something else with you. I got to find it. It'll only take me a minute. So I submitted a guest column to my hometown newspaper, the Vancouver Columbian.
Except if you also submitted to Vancouver Sun.
I actually was on the front page of the Vancouver Sun once, a color photograph, pretending like I was sipping beer and I don't drink, because it was a beer that was made in recognition of our relationship. So I wrote this column about the need to improve discourse in the public square. And of course, like every red-blooded American politician, I tweeted it out in the link. And I said, the slightest disagreement in today's politics very often triggers hate and invective, but we don't have to live this way. The cynics among us will claim this is akin to spitting into the ocean. I say to them, America is worth fighting for. And here's what the first comment said. Hey, stupid, a really vile term. You still think the walls are closing in on Trump? You absolute effing moron. This is a clap back to my call for civility. So more seriously, no, is this being recorded? Okay, I won't tell the story.
Just leave the swearing with it.
I'm real concerned about all of this. And so I reached out to the Evans School at the University of Washington, the Ruckelshaus Center, which is a joint UW-WSU entity, and the Henry M. Jackson Foundation. And we stood up something called the Project for Civic Health. And our goal is to advocate for improved discourse in the public square. Or put another way, how we talk to each other, especially as it relates to public policy. We have done the poll, we've done focus groups, we've held 2 statewide summits. The Ruckelshaus Center spun off a long-term program to train up newly elected city council people on how to work across differences. The legislature, in a very rare move, created a joint select committee on civic health, and we have applied that to orientations of new members about how to effectively collaborate across differences, and many more things in the pipeline and yet to come. We decided that we really needed to distill our core principles. And although we talked about it a long time, it really ended up not being that hard. What is it we stood for? What is it we believe there needs to be more of? What is it that, unfortunately, I think we've in part lost sight of? And those 3 core principles are as follows. Engage respectfully. Again, that's ancient wisdom. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. Number 2, seek common ground. Now, I know that among a lot of circles, unfortunately, compromise become a dirty word. I don't think it is. Moreover, I'll tell you this. To my way of thinking, deliciously, increasingly diverse society, I know of no other way to sustain a democracy unless we seek common ground. The alternative is all or nothing, my way or the highway, which means nothing will ever get done. Engage respectfully, seek common ground, and lastly, disagree constructively. Um, we don't have to burn the house down just because we have a disagreement every time. And that's a lot of what's going on. We're burning the house down. There is so much othering going on. And think about the insidious, and I will use this word advisedly, evil nature of when you describe somebody or someone is described as the enemy because they don't agree with you. Enemy is a war combatant term. And we all know what happens in war. And the more constantly we do that, the more pervasively we do that, this othering, dehumanizing the people with whom we disagree, the harder it is for us to make this democracy work. This is a 200 and almost 50-year-old, longest running democratic republic on the face of the planet. And nobody ever said it would be easy. In fact, they said it would be hard, and it's really hard right now. Engage respectfully, seek common ground, and disagree constructively. We have a website, project4civichealth.org. We invite people to go there, project4civichealth.org. You have an opportunity to say, I endorse these principles. We're not going to ask you for any money. We don't want your money. We want you to help us lift this up. And I'm not naive. This is my 52nd year of intermittent state service. Not naive, but I have been astounded at the magic of what happens when you put a diverse group of people, conservative Republicans and liberal Democrats and every other kind of diversity in a room and discuss this topic, how adult-like they become almost immediately. Just talking about this, just lifting this up and saying we need more of this matters. So I hope you will.
Thank you. Hi, Denny. Hi, Denny. John Carlson here.
John Carlson?
Yes,
You not the one that used to have the radio show.
no, nor hockey, nor many others. I just hide behind my name quite often. But I did find out we have the same clothier who dressed us up in Tacoma. And we have the same hairstylist also. My question dovetails off of the civics chair. I think about the comment you just made about your tweet. And when we look at technology, we're fighting not only amongst ourselves. I mean, I have friends on all sides. But what I find is the reactions often are technological to bots. And it is not our own fights that we're fighting. We're instigated by, I would say, other countries, other people who are buying farms of bots out there that are controlling it. So what are we doing civically or intelligently to say, how do we get rid of this crap, right? Because we don't need that in our own discussions, but people get into their own lexicon and then they talk it and then they get angry and then we just fight each other. And when the real enemy is somebody else trying to get us to sort of be angry at each other.
Very well said, John. Thank you. So technology is driving a lot of this. What we have to remember is we get more of the behavior that we incentivize. Let me break that down. And this started way before social media platforms. The technology drove 400 channels on cable. Find your confirmation bias number and watch, right? But social media platforms took it to a whole new level. And the difficult thing to understand about social media platforms is their business model. And they're basically advertising houses directly or indirectly, right, John? Their business model is predicated on how many eyeballs they can bring to their site or their platform and how long they can keep them. That drives their money. And what they discovered through hardcore neuroscience is if they can make you angry or afraid, it literally releases dopamine. And dopamine is addictive. And so they began constructing algorithms that would play on that and make you angry and angrier. And they'd figure out how to make you angry and how to make you afraid because it would draw you and it would keep you and they would make more money. That's how they're incentivized. Now, the politicians, why are we getting this behavior from them? They're incentivized. If they tweet or whatever it is people do these days on, so that's Deandra Hassan there. She's my communications director. He's always talking to me. Yeah. I don't know. She's an immigrant. Doing a spectacular job, I might add, and a proud University of Washington Husky. Um, um, she's always talking to me about social media platforms I've never heard of. But so politicians, let's take it back a few years because we all remember Twitter. They write these things that are pretty snarky, make you angry, make you afraid by othering people. And they get more clicks, they get more likes, they get more followers, and then they can monetize that. They are incentivized to play along. And we all lose. We all lose. So I don't have a lot of good things to say about the business model of social media platforms as it relates to public discourse. And we all know how difficult it is to deal with big tech. We also know, in fairness to big tech, the difficulty, complexity, and dangers of dealing with our sacred First Amendment rights. So it's a hard one. It's not like there's an easy answer. I think we all benefit if we are more aware that this is all going on. And I think we all benefit if we refrain from playing along.
Thank you, Denny.
Thank you all very much for attending.
I would like to make two last comments before Denny leaves, because I'm very happy that you spoke about civic engagement, because that's what we're trying to do here with the World Affairs Council. And second of all, with the three people in the back of the room, the three program managers for the International Study Abroad program from St. Martin's, Evergreen, and SBCC, please stand up. Thank you. What we're trying to do is raise money. We have raised money, and thank you all, to send 3 students with $1,000 each scholarships from the World Affairs Council to another country so they can have those relationships, build those civic dialogues, and you've helped us get there. So thank you again.